Good morning, everyone. As people are still joining in, I'd like to welcome all of you in the next Voices from the Field webinar. These Voices from the Field webinars are organized by tasks 6.2 and 7.2 in EU JAMRAI, and to translate the numbers to actions, it's about AMS, antimicrobial stewardship, and infection prevention and control in the animal health sector. Throughout these webinars, we invite experts from all over Europe to share their experiences from the field. And today I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Caroline Bonckaert, who is a certified pig veterinarian, but she will share with you her story and her experiences as we go. If you experience any problems with the sound or with the slides, just let us know through the chat. After the presentation, there will be ample of time for asking questions, going into discussion, because this is the goal of the Voices from the Field webinars. It's meant to exchange ideas and practices, to give feedback on presentations, or to generate new ideas. And we can take that into our work for EU JAMRAI as well as into just our network. So with that, I'd like to welcome Caroline and give the floor to her. And for those of you who have any urgent questions, type them in the chat. We address everything at the end of the presentation. Thanks. Caroline, it's your turn.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Bonckaert. As Anne told you, since 2012, I'm a pig veterinarian. And since last year, I'm also a European certified pig veterinarian. In 2019, I finished my PhD with my work about PRRS and vaccine safety in the virology lab at Ghent University. And that was, well, I was already working at Animal Healthcare Flanders. So that was a heavy time. At DGZ, or Animal Healthcare Flanders, as a job, I visit a lot of pig farms and I have close contacts with pig veterinarians and also pig farmers. I followed a course to become an antibiotic resistance coach, so I can coach pig farmers and veterinarians towards a more prudent antibiotic use. Because since last year, each pig farmer gets some kind of tag based on the antibiotic use, on antimicrobial use of several years ago. So you have the green farms, and of course they are not using a lot of antimicrobials, and they don't have to do anything special. Then we have the orange farms. They have a higher use of antimicrobials, and they can get with their field or herd veterinarian some action plan when they don't have to rely on an antibiotic resistant coach. But I think you hear it already, the red farms, they have a too high antimicrobial use for several years, and they are obliged to rely on an antibiotic resistance coach. So they can call on me as well. Today I prepared you a case about PRRS. As I mentioned here already, I did my PhD in it, but I guess that for most of you, PRRS is unknown. So I would like to take you into its magical world. PRRS, or porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus, is a virus that only affects pigs, so you don't have to be afraid of it. However, it can cause huge clinical and financial problems. In adult animals, in sows and in boars, we have mainly the reproductive signs, and the respiratory signs are most likely seen in piglets. So what are those problems? In sows, we often see abortion storms at different times of the gestation. In the farrowing unit, we can see the early farrowing. That means that sows are delivering the piglets 4 to 7 days before the due date. And the due date is in pigs or in sows 3 months, 3 weeks and 3 days. Or in other words, 115 days. So those piglets are born, but they are not ready to live. So all the piglets die. On the other hand, we have also sows that deliver the piglets at term, so at 115 days, more or less. But there is a mixture of piglets seen that are born. We have the mummified piglets, as you can see here on the picture. We have the weak-born piglets, we have the stillborn piglets, and also we have piglets that look completely normal. The weak-born piglets, most of them die in the first week of the nursery, so we see an increased mortality rates in those piglets and in the nursery, the farrowing unit. In boars at the AI centers, most likely, often there are no signs. Sometimes there's a little bit of fever and therefore also anorexia, and some studies state that there is a reduced sperm quality. But not all studies are saying the same thing. As respiratory signs, we can see sneezing and coughing, and of course, piglets are also sick because of the fever. I told you already it can have a huge financial impact, and there are some countries that did some studies. The annual cost per sow can range from 4 to 379 euros per sow on a year. Thus. And in the Netherlands, there was also a study that the cost is more or less 130 euro per sow, more, let's say, 4 months, 5 months after an outbreak. So it is clear that a lot of European countries are taking action to prevent outbreaks. And the first step is to monitor the PRRS stages in piglets, as those are the most vulnerable piglets of animal category at a pig farm. They get the immunity from the sow, the maternal immunity from the sow, but after weaning, they have to do it by themselves. So therefore, it is important to monitor those piglets. And we have a voluntary PRRS program in Belgium, and the PRRS Monitor Piglets is one of the most important features of it. Therefore, the field veterinarian is taking blood samples, 20 in total, 20 piglets that are just weaned, and then 10 piglets that are later around 20-25 kilograms. The blood is sampled in a pool of 5, so we have 4 pools that are subjected to PCR testing. That's to know if the virus is present or not. Whenever the virus is present, there is a sequencing followed on the PCR testing. If there is only one pool positive for PRRS, it's logical that that one pool is sequenced. If there are more than one pool positive, then we take the pool with the lowest CT value, so the most amount of virus in the pool. And thanks to the Federal Public Service, Health, Food Chain Safety and Environment, there's a nice reduction in this price for the PCR testing, and the sequencing is fully compensated. Here you can see a schematic overview of a genome of PRRS. So it's these arrows, let's say, are the different open reading frames. And you can see that in the beginning, in the beginning, there was only a sequencing based on or5. And you can see that this is only a very small part of a genome. That means if we had a comparison between 2 strains and the conclusion was it would be the same strain, that we weren't even sure if it was indeed the same strain because we are lacking a lot of information. And on top, the OR5 is also very variable region, so we weren't sure. If the conclusion of the comparison was there are 2 different strains, then we were for sure that there were 2 different strains. So by now, luckily, we have sequencing of 1B27, and that is just always sequenced, and sometimes of a piece of 1 is also successful to be sequenced. Each of these open reading frames is compared to some reference strains. And the reference strains are even the live vaccines of modified live vaccines, and also 2 field strains that perhaps some of you know, the Rosalia strain, a strain in Spain, which caused a lot of problems and still is causing a lot of problems in Spain. And Lina, that's a strain that we don't want to have here, and comes from Belarus. So each open reading frame is compared to those reference strain and gets its color. As here, you only have the light gray color. It represents a field strain. Upon the sequencing, we have also our colleagues of Cienzano that put up a phylogenetic tree. And it is important after several times that you complete PRRS monitor piglets. Those strains are therefore compared, and you get a phylogenetic tree. And you can see that sometimes you have a cluster or sometimes you have a new strain coming in on the farm. And of course, it's logical if you have sometimes a new strain coming in on the farm that the biosecurity measures have to take into account. You have to get some ideas how that virus gets into your farm. If you have a strain that is found several times at your farm, then you can have a look at the internal biosecurity measures on your farm. And therefore, taking that all together, you can handle the PRRS on the farm. So I have a case here with the first complaint of the farmer and the field veterinarian was that antibiotic use has been raised and also that the piglets were looking very strange. It concerns a mixed farm, so they have cows and sows, 280 sows that work in a 3-week batch system, and they are weaning the piglets at 4 weeks of age. The problem was the strange-looking piglets, the higher antibiotic use, high mortality rate in the piglets, but also the piglets that are not looking nice, they have skin lesions, and there's also diarrhea. So we tried to put some to necropsy some piglets at our lab, and indeed that was clear that the piglets were of poor quality. The skin wasn't looking good, and they had some diarrhea. But inside, we also saw a swollen spleen and enlarged lymph nodes. So for the diagnostics, histology indeed confirmed the pustular dermatitis and the ulcers. And for bacteriology and the skin, we confirmed the presence of the Staphylococcus aureus. In spleen, even several bacteria were found. I also wanted to know something more because we saw the swollen spleen and the lymph nodes that were swollen. So I asked for a PCR to discover if PRRS was present or PCV2, also another virus in piglets that is very common. And PCV2 was negative, but indeed PRRS was present in a CT of 22. And PRSV is also known for an immunosuppressive power, so secondary bacterial infections are quite common. The use of antimicrobial will give some small relief, but if the primary cause is not handled, the problem will stay. So therefore, we had to handle the virus, and in this case, PRRS. Here's an overview of the farm. So the cows are housed here. The house is over here, hygiene log. The sows are housed in 2 different stables. And here in the first part, we have the nursery. So I went to the farm to discuss the results of the necropsy and the laboratory tests. The first thing that I asked was the vaccination protocol of the sows. The sows were given a modified live vaccine at day 10 after farrowing, and at that time also the piglets were vaccinated using the same vaccine. The gilts are purchased, but they get vaccinated at a breeding farm and there was no booster on site. So I gave some changes, suggestions, because I think there were some lapses in the vaccination protocol. First, it was for me very important to give a booster vaccination to the gills in quarantine, but also to vaccinate the teething boars. Those boars, they can have contact, or they should have contact, with all the sows in the farm. So if they are sick, they just spread it from nose to nose by the teething boars. And as there was already some problems in the farm, I also recommended to use an inactivated PRRS vaccine for all the sows and the boars for one time. And then also they had to pay attention to the internal biosecurity measures, namely they had to use 1 needle per 10 sows. The farmers agreed with those changes because at that time they said the problem was very high. The financial cost was too high. So at that time, they really wanted to do something to block the infection. Vaccination is not the only thing that they have to do, and biosecurity is also very important. So for the external biosecurity measures, I said that the boots from the cows cannot be used anymore in the pig barns. And they had to wash their hands, of course, another coverall, but the boots, that was something that was sometimes taken from one stable to the others. So I said, no, that is not allowed anymore. Internal biosecurity measures, they had to do something with the leftover piglets. So the leftover piglets are the piglets that are not growing as fast as the litter mates after weaning. And of course, there's some reason why they are not growing as much as the others. Most likely they are sick or some illness is underneath. And those piglets, they can get some extra time to grow and become 25 kilograms, let's say. But they stay at the farm and they were handled just the same as the just weaned piglets. But it's quite clear that the immune system and the immunity between those piglets is not the same. So that's asking for problems. They also had to use multiple blades for castration and use disinfection, because making incisions, if it's vaccination, castration, or any injection by needle, it is creating an opening for an entrance for bacteria. So more attention to prevent this way of transmission was also recommended. And as the farmers were not aware of such possible transmission, they were also agreeing by, and they did it immediately. The financial problem, as I mentioned before, was just too high. They would do almost everything. Here I implemented also a picture of a freshly new blade, and then how fast it is actually, it can be broken or bended, but for sure the sharpness is gone. So therefore I wanted to show you this picture here. 1 needle per litter for vaccination, so 10 animals, sometimes a little bit more. It's maximum. You cannot use 1 needle for all the sows, all the piglets of all the sows at that time. So the leftover piglets were housed here, so next, right next to the nursery and the just weaned piglets. They had to change the boots, they had to wash their hands, and also take another coverall whenever they visit the leftover piglets. We also did some further diagnostics, and the first thing was the processing fluids. Processing fluids is the tissue exudates derived from piglet castration and also tail docking practices. The exudate is tested for PCR, and that was negative, which suggested that there was a vaccine-controlled infection at that time. The PRRS monitor piglets. There was in October a weak and moderate PCR results in those animals. But in December, there were very strong PCR results. And because we had some action points and we thought it was all in control, we also did a DIVA vaccine that revealed that the vaccine virus was present. We did the DIVA PCR because the results were a little bit faster than the sequencing at Cienzano. But of course, we waited for the results, and here you can see those results. We have indeed a strain that is most likely the vaccine virus, but on top of it, we also found a new field strain. So there were two kinds of strains circulating at that farm. In December 2001, I went to the farm again because of the problems and the results that were a little bit strange. And then the farmer told me, yes, that's true. We also had some sows that aborted. After some discussion, it was actually an early farrowing. And we discovered PRRS in those fetuses as well. Then it came out that the sows were also coughing, although the weaned piglets were doing fine. So we had to find a reason why there was again some circulation. And then we found that the gilts were not quarantined at all. So usually they had a quarantine phase, but there was no vaccination. I recommended to have the vaccination again in the quarantine part. But this time they were not vaccinated and they were not quarantined. They were introduced directly into the sow barn. So the balance of immune and not immune animals disappeared, and that caused the recirculation of the virus. As an action, I recommended to use the inactivated PRRS vaccine again for all the sows, using 1 needle per 10 sows. In January 2012, there were no abortions anymore. The sows were not coughing. The processing fluids were positive, but only in the younger sows. So we gave it the chance for vaccination. Vaccination had to do something in those younger animals. And in February, the PRRS monitor piglets showed improved control. Only 1 week positive pool and only the older animals. So the animals were looking clinically fine, and it was a little bit of surprise that it was still positive. The sequencing was indeed here again the Suvaccine vaccine, the vaccination strain, let's say. So as we found the vaccine strain and the piglets were doing fine, we are not wandering anymore or pushing anymore towards PRRS. So PRRS management requires structured diagnostics, also vaccination and biosecurity, and followed by monitoring. Small errors like the vaccination that is not given in the quarantine or the teasing boars that are not vaccinated at all, they can have major consequences. And systematic monitoring leads to improvement of the animal health, the finances, of course, and therefore also the farmer's happiness. And that was my talk. If you have questions, suggestions, or remarks, I'm happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for the presentation. Very interesting indeed to hear about these different biosecurity measures put in place. The floor is open for some questions on the presentation itself or in the broader context, of course, of implementing biosecurity measures and IPC in the pig sector. To do this, you can either type your question in the chat, or I can also allow yourself to unmute yourself I can change the settings, and then if you prefer, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera. I have some questions, but I prefer someone else to maybe get started. Any questions from the audience or remarks or other shared experiences with peers in their settings and countries? Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am mute. Yeah, and let me switch on the camera. Yeah, thank you so much for a really nice presentation. I'm a bit outside of the virology diseases in pigs, but as you mentioned that the presence of peers could increase the use of antimicrobial use, I wonder at the end if this use of antimicrobials has decreased due to all these improvements carried out in the biosecurity, not only to decrease the peers situation, but also antimicrobial use on it. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed, the antimicrobial use has decreased again, indeed. Until today, they almost use nothing. So they still monitor the peers, but the peers monitor piglets, and it's mostly fine. The piglets are doing fine, and therefore they don't need to use some antibiotics. So it's a really nice correlation between the use of antimicrobials and peers.
Thanks, Caroline. I don't know if you see the chat, but I can share a question from Edgar, who asks, how does the coaching certification work in Belgium? So the AMU, it's the AR coaching in Belgium. How does it specifically work?
Yeah, that was a course that was, how to say, it was offered by the Federal Public Service, and they had to rely on the teachers, and then you could follow the course, and you had to give a presentation, some case representation at the end of the course. And then you have the certification you can get on the website of the site of the FOD, of the Federal Public Service. And then the people that need a coach, they can contact you there.
Does that clarify a bit the question? I know that somebody from our government is actually joining. So if she'd like to clarify more or to add more, because this follows actually some ministerial decisions that have been taken in Belgium, the need for a reduction coach if you are in subsequent phases marked as a red. And I see Kathy there, so she might be keen to address it a bit more.
Yes, hello everybody. Yes, in Belgium we have a royal decree on the prevention and control of antimicrobial resistance in animals, and a part of this royal decree is dedicated to actually a mandatory coaching of farmers who are in what is called the red zone on their use of antibiotics for 3 consecutive years. And they have to, as the advice of a registered or I don't know what you call it in English, but a registered antibiotic resistant coach. And such a coach has to follow some kind of indication. It's also described in the royal decree what the content of the formation has to be. Now, previously we did from the authorities, we did finance some of these courses. But now the purpose is that organizations that do give courses to vets can organize these courses if their program is actually validated by us. So, but now at this moment, it's only for pigs, for veal calves, and for some categories of poultry. But the purpose is to expand it to different farming animal species and categories in the future, depending on the data we collect on the use of antibiotics.
Thank you both for the additional information on the coaching process here in Belgium. And Edgar, I hope it clarifies a little bit more, and maybe from what happens in Ireland, it can inspire. Any other questions on the presentation or on the topic? Rice. I'd like to ask maybe a question, Caroline. So you mentioned a couple of changes that the farmer needed to implement, changes in internal and external biosecurity. From your experience, how do you work on assuring that these changes actually become a habit for the farmer? Because I think what we all agree on is that there's a difficult phase, like there might be a one-time change or even not fully, as you saw with the quarantine of the gilts lacking. So how do you make something more a habit in the farm? What's your recommendation? How can we do that or support the farmer in that?
I think you have to repeat a lot of possible transmission routes. They have to be aware of it, why it is important. And then the next step for me, it is very important that it's easily implemented in the daily working routine. If it's really causing a lot of extra effort they have to do, it's very, very, very difficult to have it in a routine daily thing. So it have to be practical, and therefore sometimes you have to do it step by step, not all at once. Of course, you have to see the bigger picture, but you have to cut it sometimes in pieces.
Okay, so start by small steps and guide them through and support them by taking each step, like kind of highlight the success they make.
Yes, yes, indeed, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I see some more questions in the chat. So there's a question from Ines on the strains. So the field strain differed from the vaccine strain. So they're currently facing the requests for the use of autogenous vaccines for PRRS. And she would like to ask whether you have any experience with the approach of autogenous vaccines. So in your case, the commercial vaccine strain is ultimately proved to be effective, but how would you comment on approaching these situations in practice and the use of autogenous vaccines? And Ines, please don't hesitate to add if I didn't fully translate the question correctly.
Yes, of course. From my experience at Ghent University for my PhD, we can say that their most protective way is to use autogenous vaccine. A homologous protection is best. However, using those commercial vaccines, they also provide sufficient protection. It is not possible, in my eyes, to have an autogenous vaccine on each farm. And therefore, I prefer the commercial vaccines that they do their job. It's never how to say a wonder thing. You still have to implement other biosecurity measures because vaccination alone will not solve the problem. Also, an autogenous vaccine will not solve the problem. And therefore, I think it's best to use a commercial vaccine. Those are indeed registered. They have a lot done. They had to do a lot of things to get it on the market, so you can be sure of the safety as well. With autogenous vaccine, it's not always the case.
Thanks, Caroline. And I saw the thumbs up from Ines. I have another question from Marina for you about the sequence found in the gilts and its relation with the farm where the gilts are brought from.
Yeah, we don't have the gilts, sequence of the gilts at that farm to compare it with the breeding farm, of course. There we have the privacy law that is not allowing us to share the information or to compare those two strains. In addition, it's a voluntary program here, the PRRS program. So if the breeding farm is not taking a part of the PRRS program, we don't have the data either. So we have the two different difficulties. because it's a voluntary program.
And if I may ask a second question about this follow-up question. I'm a vet in the Netherlands and I'm working on PRRS since a year. And I'm recommending farmers to share sequence data because you can show the route of spreads. Indeed. So do you know for Belgium if there is anything for that in the pipeline, that maybe in the future there is the intention to start sharing between farms, or you expect it won't happen?
Within the field veterinarians practices, we can do it, but that's some confidential information for the veterinarian, but we cannot share the information with others externally. That's we cannot do it. It's all the privacy law. Yeah, it's not possible. All farmers have to sign a consent that the data will be used, and then we can do it. But until today, we didn't ask it. Perhaps it should be done. We thought already about it, but never taking some action, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And I really enjoyed the presentation, so thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Caroline? Caroline, just one maybe, because you mentioned it's a voluntary program. Do you know how many pig farmers participate in it from the whole of pig farmers we have in Flanders or in Belgium? Do you have like an idea?
We have about 8% of the pig farmers that have weaned piglets that are taking a part of the PRRS monitored piglets. For the breeding farms, we have more or less the same monitor, and for the fattening pigs as well. But for there, I'm not very sure about the participation rate. No, I'm not sure.
And do you feel once they started to participate, they're actually keen on continuing with the monitor?
There's a huge influence of the veterinarian there. If the veterinarian is really believing in those results and taking some action with it, then they can be they can take part of it for a very long time.
Yeah.
But they have to believe in it. They have to see the reason why, and therefore communication is very important. Yeah. And I'm wondering if I can ask also a question to you all, how you are taking or handling PRRS in your country. Is there also some kind of national plan? In the Netherlands, I'm aware of it, but in the other countries, I'm not completely sure if it's voluntary or mandatory. So I'm happy to hear your thoughts and information.
Anyone keen to share a little bit on PRRS in their country, or?
Hi, I think Edgar is gone, so that's why I can't see him anyway, unless he wants to say something. So yeah, we have a kind of a voluntary program just starting in Ireland, where we're sort of mirroring our big pig producing area is in the sort of north part of the Republic of Ireland, so bordering on the north of Ireland, and they've had a voluntary program going in the north of Ireland for quite a while, where they are doing a coordinated vaccination of all the farmers in the area. And so now they are trying to mirror that now in the pig producing areas of Cavan and Monaghan, which are the border counties which border the north of Ireland. So we're trying to get the same thing going there, and they've been doing monitoring with blood sampling as well, and that sort of thing. So I was interested actually in how you decided on your monitoring, like how you decided on that program of taking the samples and pooling pooling 5 and testing them that way.
Yeah, it's to reduce the costs as well, because a PCR it's quite costly.
Yes, indeed.
And
indeed, yeah.
it is shown that you don't lose information by pooling by 5. So it's best.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you all. And Caroline, if you'd like to hear more about it, I know Edgar will also have information on this, as Nola said, and he asked a question in the beginning, but indeed he left, because indeed it's already 12:15, so we're also near the end of the webinar. So if there are no further urging questions at this point, then I would like to thank you for the interesting case presented. For showing us how little steps can make a difference and supporting the farmer in that. And thanks again, everyone here for attending. So with that, everyone enjoy lunch and a good weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.